Americans love stories. This story ends with a climax in space, and it starts right here on Earth. Money, fame, immortality. People will feel like they know you. They'll want to be you. Astronauts. Astro meaning star, not Voyager. Nobody has ever seen anything like you men until now. Few things live forever in the soul of a country. You're heroes. John Glenn. Alan Shepard.
We've got the best pilots in the United States.
I know what you want, John. But it's almost like you're afraid of the competition.
Protect your image. We'll have everything to lose.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello. Welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the executive producer and astronaut cast of The Right Stuff. We'd like to thank our friends at Nat Geo and Disney Plus, as well as Ginsberg Libby PR for making this event possible. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today. Jenelle Riley is the Deputy Awards and Features Editor at Variety. She has received 2 Emmy Awards for her work on Variety PBS's Actors on Actors series. Welcome, Jenelle. Welcome, panelists. And please take it away.
Hi, thank you so much for having us. And thank you all at home for joining us for this PGA Q&A with The Right Stuff. This awe-inspiring true story is the first scripted series for Disney Plus from National Geographic. It's truly epic in scope and scale, and I'm so excited to welcome the talented people who brought this series to life. I want to start with executive producer Jennifer Davisson.
Hi, how are you?
We also have the actor who plays Major John Glenn. Please welcome Patrick J. Adams.
Hello.
He stars as Lieutenant Commander Alan Shepard, Jake McDorman.
Hi.
He portrays Captain Gordon Cooper, Colin O'Donoghue.
Hi.
We have the actor who plays Captain Scott Carpenter. Please welcome James Lafferty.
Hello.
And the actor who plays Gus Grissom, Michael Trotter.
Hello.
Also joining us, the actor who plays Wally Schirra. Please welcome Aaron Staton. And finally, he portrays Deke Slayton. Please give a warm welcome to Micah Stock. Thank you all so much for being here. I just want to start at the beginning with Jennifer, because the story of the Mercury 7 astronauts is such a timeless one. And even though Tom Wolfe published his book like 40 years ago, what made you want to tell this story today, and what makes this version unique?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of things I could say about that. We were actually looking at Chuck Yeager's story, which is amazing and wonderful, and really looking at his autobiography. And that, while doing that, we started re-looking at The Right Stuff. And it was actually a book that I thought I had read, but maybe I didn't read, and I kind of wasn't really sure. And one of our longtime executives, Michael Hampton, said to me, "You need to sit down and read The Right Stuff, because I think that there's something really special here." And so I did, and was really, really, really blown away, because it doesn't feel like it was written decades ago. It feels like it was written months ago, years ago. And so, and what we were so compelled by was how much of the book was not really explored in the movie. As wonderful as the movie is, and such a like fan of the movie and remember it so fondly, and obviously have gone back and rewatched it since, but there was so much that they just didn't have the time and space to cover in, even though it was a long movie at 3 hours. They just didn't, there was so much story and so much detail and so much character. And television being what television is now, you kind of could do that. You could kind of really get into the minds of all 7 of these guys. And so we were like, wow, this is the right moment to do this. Also because I think space is something that's kind of always fascinating. People are always curious about, always want to talk about. Little kids are always dressing up as astronauts for Halloween. I say that because I saw many of them yesterday. But it feels like there's a newfound kind of excitement in space. And to be able to go all the way back to the beginning and look at what really went into making it, which is kind of crazy. We think of it, and I think of it, I grew up during the shuttle era, and you think of these big, gigantic things and these sort of real life heroes and these astronauts. And when you go and you read Wolfe's book, what's so kind of compelling, it was the opposite. These were like normal everyday guys who were not out to be something special, were not looking to be on the cover of magazines. And the space program itself was really put together in a very kind of lo-fi way. And so we felt like not a lot of that had really been explored in space films or television. And so we jumped on the opportunity.
I mean, yeah, 8 episodes to get to tell the story, or, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there now, season 1 of this story. There's still more you can tell. I'm curious for the cast, were any of you familiar with the book prior to signing on? And what attracted you to your roles and this project specifically? So first I'll ask, did anyone read the book before this role came to them? All right, Patrick, let's start with you.
I think a lot of us read the book. I read the book when I was quite young. My father, who was a journalist as well, so he was a big fan of Tom Wolfe, as well as the space program. He gave me the book at a young age. And so it's one of the first books I remember like really consciously just falling deeply in love with and having to read kind of twice through just to get it all. I can't say that I fully like understood everything or got all the nuances that were intended at the age of like 14 or 15, but it definitely left a mark on me. And then of course I saw the film, which, made me even more infatuated with the space program and these guys. And then when I found out that this was going to be made, when I saw it in my inbox that there was a series coming out, I thought that's so perfect, just for the exact reason Jennifer just outlined. It was like there was not enough time in that film to get at all of the little machinations and relationships between these guys in like 3.5 hours or whatever it was. So the idea that would there be more time to explore that was so exciting to me. Just as a fan of the book, I had no idea, I didn't even know at that point I was going to get an audition. I asked that, I said I'd love to be a part of it, and they said they'd love to see me for John Glenn, and I said there's no way I'm going to get to be John Glenn. Somebody else is going to be John Glenn. But was so excited at the prospect of it, worked hard on the audition, and so that's what brought me to it, was just the source material alone. I would have joyfully played any one of these guys just to be a part of bringing this story to a new generation of people.
Wow. And Colin, you had read the book as well?
I'd read the book. It was Jennifer and Michael Hampton gave me the book. I was on another show, it's probably about 4 years ago, I think it was, and I had a meeting at Appian Way, and just as I was leaving, they were giving me a load of different, like, Pete the Cat books for my kids and stuff like that, and then Michael handed me the rights of, and I don't think it had even been, there was no script or anything for it, but I remember reading it and thinking, I would love to, if I was no longer on the show that I was on, or if, I would love to be a part of it. And that was kind of the thing that I was really looking for. And luckily, here I am doing the panel now. Like similar to Patrick, though, I was always fascinated by, by space, as anybody who isn't really. And just to get to play, one of these guys was a real, a treat. So, I was delighted.
Jake, what about for you?
I actually had kind of the opposite experience. I hadn't read the book, I hadn't seen the movie, I had known about them, but I hadn't actually, read or seen them. So my first introduction to really the Mercury program as a whole was through Mark Lafferty's script. And, I was blown away by how well Mark was able to kind of keep all these plates spinning, not just with the astronauts themselves, but also with their wives and, Bob Gilruth, Chris Kraft over at NASA, and kind of the inception of the space program as a whole. I thought he did that so well that I was kind of grateful to have been introduced to it, through the lens that we were going to be telling our version of these events with, not to mention not having, the added pressure when you play somebody actually from history, but that has also been portrayed by incredible actors like Ed Harris or Scott Glenn, weighing on me, on top of that. I got to kind of go into it with a fresh look at it. And then obviously through the research, I read the book and watched the movie, and kind of to echo what Jennifer and Patrick said is just, imagining this story with just 8 hours of real estate to really get into the minutia of this experience was really, really exciting. But, I think that probably a lot of people from my generation, or especially people from a younger generations, are very familiar with Apollo and the Apollo 11 mission landing on the moon, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, those guys. But even though there has been the right stuff written and the right stuff adapted into a major motion picture, it still somehow remains relatively untold, this like first group of astronauts jumping into the space race with the Russians. So all of it was really educational for me. And I was really grateful to have Mark Lafferty's script as a framework that was installed initially to then kind of go out and accumulate all the different research about who Alan Shepard was as a human, and these events from multiple perspectives, from a variety of different sources, to then bring back home to the script that we were going to tell.
Aaron, how about for you?
I have to be honest with you, I dropped out for a second because I was dealing with an internet thing. So I think what is the question?
Oh, I'm curious, first of all, if you were familiar with the book before this project found its way to you, but also what attracted you to the role?
I was familiar with the book, like a few of the other folks on here. I hadn't read it before, to be honest. I hadn't read it before getting the role. So, but there's so many sort of meta aspects to this experience from starting it out to, so, you get the audition in your inbox, and there are names, and so Appian Way's on there, and Warner Brothers, and then obviously I know, I hadn't seen the movie, but I know, I understand the sort of gravity of the whole thing. But sorry, Patrick.
You did not appreciate that pun.
I did. Got
to do something. It's the day before the election. So but sort of going in, the sort of meta aspect to it, these are 100 of these test pilots are going to show up and vie for this role. And I always, as an actor, feel like it's a miracle to get any job. And so with all of these added, names and everything that makes this experience what I think we all felt that it could be, it sort of created this kind of incredible, just meta way to begin that experience. So I hadn't read it, but it kind of benefited, I think, for me.
James, what about for you?
I hadn't read the book or seen the movie when I first got the audition for The Right Stuff. I think, like most kids, my textbooks in school sort of just glossed over maybe mentioning, the Mercury 7, John Glenn, Alan Shepard, before going on to the bigger chapters about, the Apollo missions. And so, I'd always had a fascination with space. And I think actually not long before I got this audition, I read a book called Starman about Yuri Gagarin, who was the first Russian cosmonaut. And that story really struck me because I had no idea just how primitive the technology was for, the astronauts going up there, strapping yourself to a rocket, basically in a tin can with a transistor radio, and having no idea really what's going to happen while you're up there. And I'm really glad that, I got this opportunity to be a part of this project, not just because of, how amazing it is to work with all of these people and this, story that is just so larger than life, but the education that I've gotten about the Mercury program has been just one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. Reading Tom Wolfe's book, reading We 7, this like sort of shared biography of the astronauts, reading Scott Carpenter's biography, getting in there, I just, I feel like I have a much better knowledge of a time and a place and art history, like our shared history. And it just continues to fascinate me. I still to this day feel like I've just barely scratched the surface, and I can't wait to learn more.
Micah, for you?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of the book except sort of in a distant way prior to this, but I was familiar with John Glenn. I grew up in Ohio, and John Glenn is sort of Ohio's original geek hunk sweetheart. Not to mention, a Democratic senator from Ohio for many years. One of the few politicians that we should be proud to have exported. And I won't name names. But then, yeah, when I saw the book, my first connection to it was this script. And how good I thought it was. It wasn't a world that I ever thought that I would want to explore. It wasn't a world that I didn't think I'd want to explore, but when I saw the script, that immediately sparked a sort of whirlwind romance with these guys and with the time. And yeah, and the book was just one aspect of that. We were very lucky to have lots of footage and research to draw upon from, because these guys were so much in the public eye. And for Deke Slayton, he was a career NASA employee. So there was a lot to draw upon.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, for you?
Yeah, I had read the book in high school, and seen the movie as well. Funny enough, I remember being taken more with Chuck Yeager's story than with the Mercury 7, sad to admit, but I'm also just a huge fan of Sam Shepard's work too, just not just as an actor, but as a playwright. So that was my first sort of connection point to it. And then, similar to what other guys have said, when I saw the email in my inbox, I didn't come to Gus knowing much about him. Similar to everybody else, I knew the name John Glenn and Helen Shepard, and certainly remembered a little bits and pieces from the book and the movie, but didn't come to Gus knowing too much about him, which frankly I'm grateful for, because it didn't, establish in me any kind of preconceived notion as to who he was. It was kind of a little bit of an open book to be able to just kind of dig in and discover, the truth of his life and his relationship to these other guys and to the program.
Yeah. And I understand you filmed the series in Florida, which is where the real events unfolded. And you actually, in Orlando, you built these stages to create the NASA's Langley offices and the Hangar S, where the actual training of the astronauts took place. Jennifer, I'm curious, sort of why you made that choice. I mean, it may seem obvious, but I'd love to know it. And for the actors, what was it like filming in the birthplace of the American space program?
So, it was a really, really kind of bold, crazy, what's the difference? But either one, depends on who you ask, choice to shoot in Florida because there's no rebate in Florida. And we were really, really passionate about making it work there for a couple different reasons. We really wanted to be close to Cape Canaveral. I felt like, and I was really vocal about it, probably the most vocal of all of the executive producers, where I felt like we were making a show about the Florida sky, and you could go to Atlanta or North Carolina and you could recreate stuff, but that it just, if you could bake it into the DNA of the show, because Florida is its own character, it has its own episode where it gets introduced. And so, I felt like you needed to bake it in, and you needed to really show it, to show it in its truest form. And plus, Florida's just so specific. It's its own kind of wild, crazy place. And so much of what what started in Cocoa Beach and Cape Canaveral still stands there. And in some ways, it's a living monument to the space program and the evolving space program, but starting with Project Mercury. And so we just really had a strong desire to try to figure out how to make it work. And we were really lucky. The Air Force was fantastic because a lot of that land, that the land in Cape Canaveral is owned by the Air Force, not by NASA. And the Air Force was really, really wonderful. And we were able to shoot actually on the launch pads, in the blockhouse, all these kind of real places. And it's just seeped into the culture there. And so it paid off. It really paid off. And I think from a production value standpoint, you know we're not faking it. What was ironic was that we kept having to fake Virginia in Florida. So we kept having to fake, like, it's really, really cold. So these guys were all like, some of them were like bundled in coats, and it was the middle of August in Orlando, and they were, beads of sweat. We kept having to, blowing snow and all that kind of stuff. But I do think that the Florida stuff really, really, really paid off. And I'm really proud that we stuck to our guns and did it. As for shooting there, these guys all have their own opinions about it. So I'll let them jump in about what it is to shoot in Florida.
Yes, please.
Well, I'll say, I wasn't excited by the idea just because I knew we were heading into Florida in the summer, which I'd never actually experienced for myself, but I'd heard some stories about, and they weren't wrong. It was brutally hot, but I also just didn't understand how helpful it would be to be near Cape Canaveral, as Jennifer just mentioned. I think for the first couple of weeks, I'll speak for myself, my head was sort of spinning a little bit. I was like, I don't quite know why we're here. We were shooting on the back lot of Universal Studios in Orlando. And so it was a strange commute there every day. And it's a different kind of studio because in Orlando, it's a theme park first, and then there's sort of a movie studio in the back, small studio in the back. Whereas in LA, it's very much a movie studio that they put a theme park in front of. So it just sort of felt like, what are we doing here? But I think within the first week or two, we drove out to Cape Canaveral first to just do a sort of exploratory, get to meet people out there. I think we sat and did some classes with some test pilots. We got to see some planes taking off. We got to visit some of the launch pads, and there was something that clicked there for me that said, oh, this is exactly why we have to be here. And then I got to revisit it later in the season. We went to Glenn's launch pad just to shoot a sequence with Glenn walking the launch pad at night. So I was just me out there before even the trucks arrived with the cameras and the lights. I was just standing in this spot, which has basically been forgotten. I mean, they haven't done it up. It's not part of the tour or anything out there. So I was just at this launch pad that was sort of overgrown and kind of falling apart. And you could stand on top of the blockhouse and you could see across Cape Canaveral and see them getting ready, the new Falcon ready for SpaceX launch. And you just suddenly felt like you were part of history in a way that we couldn't have faked anywhere else. And I don't know how you quantify that or how you say that, it becomes embodied in the performance or in the show itself, but I have to believe that some part of that quality kind of interlaces itself into the show. And I think at some point or another, we all drew some sort of inspiration from that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I think I always prefer to shoot on location. There's something about, and it's easy for me to say I don't necessarily have any roots anywhere. So, I understand that that's, just my perspective, but I really enjoy being on location with a big cast. I just think that it already sets a precedent that you're all here for kind of one reason, and there's a unity and kind of a cohesion there that, you're not going home to your regular space every night. You're in this new space for this one specific reason to all come together and tell this story. So I'm always like kind of a fan of shooting on location. I think it always kind of steeps the entire process in the process. But this specifically was exciting for all the reasons that Jennifer and Patrick said. I mean, it's where history took place. It's you take the same commute to Cape Canaveral in Cocoa Beach that these guys did, and it's so prevalent in the story and all the books we read and research, all these different locations, all these streets and A1A and all this stuff that, I'm sure it just, further focuses you kind of in that geography and time period and real visuals to kind of correlate these stories you've heard on a daily basis. I think for all those reasons, it's always really helpful. And then, you know, going to the actual Kennedy Space Center was invaluable. And last year was the 50th year anniversary of the moon landing for Apollo 11. So me and Patrick and Colin and Jennifer all got to go there to this gala where Michael Collins was actually there in person, and this kind of black tie event with schmoozing with actual astronauts and people at NASA at Cape Canaveral, Florida, I think the day before our first table read.
Wow.
So that just, you know, gave it this extra boost right before we all got started, which we wouldn't have had if we were shooting somewhere else, you know. And no doubt you can always make this work and make it special anywhere you go, even if it is in Los Angeles or New York or wherever you call home. But I do think it added a little bit of an edge for us to get to be in Florida.
I have to imagine as well, the costumes, the hair and makeup, the props, the production design, they're all so impeccable. For the actors, that really has to help you in portraying your roles, I imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've never worked on a period piece to this extent. I've done episodes of television that have been period, but this is the first large scale thing I've been a part of. And it was unbelievable how helpful it was. I mean, we had such top-notch people in every department. So as I think we've all said before, when you show up to set in those clothes, the sets exactly as they are, everybody dressed right, you reach for a prop and it feels like the real deal. You hit a button and it turns on and a light turns on, you know, it all just works and makes sense. It makes your job so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, even those spacesuits were custom made and took a minute to get in and out of too. So
yeah.
That definitely put you in the real, literally the shoes of these guys.
Colin, what was it?
My shirts were, I think some of the other guys who Hope had managed to sort of source these shirts that were from 1959, but had never been sold, and they still had the tags from the shop that they were from. And, you know, like it was that level of detail that sort of you can see it on the screen.
And that was something that drew me to the project, is the way Jennifer and Mark and everyone talked about it before, was that, you know, we have lots of period pieces that are all very beautiful. They were really interested in making, they kept talking about the sweat. They kept talking about, like, we don't want to be wiping the sweat from your head. We want to see you sweating. We want to see it coming through your shirts. And there was something kind of, and they really stuck to that. And there was something kind of wonderful to that. Like, we were there in Florida in the heat, wearing these, like, you know, beautiful shirts that Colin's talking about, but they're made of, you know, fabrics that aren't exactly breathable. And we were feeling it, and we didn't have a bunch of people coming and trying to correct it the whole time or make it perfect or make it beautiful. It was really like, let's make this feel real and tangible. And if you're sweating, then you're sweating.
Well, and it sounds like you were sweating because you're in Florida in August.
A lot of sweating.
Aaron, you have a lot of experience with period pieces. I mean, you must know what it's like to be on a set and be surrounded by so much authenticity that it really helps you with the character.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the job, I mean, honestly, just so much easier. Like Patrick was saying, there's no real work required when everything's done for you. You walk on, you're there, the words are there. You know, just sort of just say it and the work is done. So yeah, I think that's it.
And Jennifer, how were you able to ensure such historical accuracy with the series? I'm assuming you had loads of experts and consultants that you relied on.
Well, first you hire like-minded department heads. That's number one. Both Derek Hill and Hope Hannafin, our production and costume designer, are just amazing and so incredibly talented. And, you know, Hope sat down with us, and the first thing she said, I'm throwing out my steamer. People get wrinkles. I want there to be wrinkles. And we were like, sounds good. We love wrinkles. And then in terms of story and plot, we had a number of really, really wonderful people that were working with us who were former NASA, who were now working as consultants. We had a couple of different naval consultants to work with us on the flying sequences, and they were invaluable. I mean, and what was so interesting was that we really thought we would use them, you know, the most during prep, and then a little bit during production, and then not really need them during post. And there was a few of them that, I mean, we used them almost every single day all the way through. And it's crazy when you meet people like that who just have such a library of information that we were able to tap into. But yeah, they were all really spectacular.
And I love that the series doesn't pull any punches and showing how these great men were also very human and very flawed. And I'm fascinated by the rivalry between John Glenn and Alan Shepard as they sort of jockey for first place. James, what was it like to explore that rivalry?
For me? Sorry, Jake or for James?
Jake, sorry, I'm sorry. Jake and it said Jake, James,
I was like,
are all in my mind.
Yeah, James, what was that like?
You guys want a macro view of it all?
Too many J's.
It's a long day of shooting for it was you know, it was something that both Jennifer and Mark Lafferty had said was going to be, as far as the Glenn Shepard storyline, kind of the ultimate conflict, that these two guys wanted to be first, both thought that they were the right man for the job, but were competing with opposite ideologies. So Patrick and I knew going in that that was the case. This is a rivalry that, you know, Patrick touched on this as a different panel, but that was in the larger narrative of the Mercury 7 was kind of tamped down, I think, by the official record. But as more, you know, accounts of these events would come out through the different books and various, you know, interviews after the fact, that this was a rivalry that was pretty, you know, could be pretty bloodthirsty at times.
Mm-hmm.
Them being so different, I mean, I think it's the fact that they were, you know, on such opposite sides of the same spectrum that it got, you know, as kind of toxic and vicious as it did. Shepard being someone who, you know, had no experience with any sort of public life. I mean, most of, you know, the other astronauts were in the same boat, whereas Glenn, you know, was very, very adept at navigating publicity and very keen on understanding how the relationship with the press and the public image of the space program really dictated how far we got to go with this. I think, you know, the people that these astronauts looked up to, like Charles Lindbergh or Yeager, you know, were people who had accomplished great feats, one being like an ace pilot and the other breaking the sound barrier. And these guys were all of a sudden like hurled into international celebrity before they had done anything. And I think that was very difficult for Shepard to navigate, him being somebody that really thought that the decision on which one of these men should be first should boil down to, and only down to, who was best for the job, who could get the job done, who was the best pilot, based solely on merit, where there was this other kind of factor that was, you know, well, or is it going to be the most famous one of them? And, you know, coming into this project, the only name that I recognized was John Glenn. So I think, you know, we even covered that a little bit in our show, but the main rivalry between the two guys were these competing ideologies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn setting this kind of moral high standard for himself that, you know, kind of anointed him the leader of the group, and then Shepard kind of representing the, like, you know, no bullshit, what you see is what you get, I'm here to fly and fly fast, you know, kind of attitude of it all.
And James, we talked a little bit about the responsibility of portraying real people. I'm curious, you know, as an actor, when you're playing someone who, you know, existed, who has family and friends, do you approach it differently than you would like a fictitious role?
Yeah, I think you do. I think there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with it. I mean, you know, you do go into the project understanding that, you know, even at the level of Tom Wolfe's book, you know, he was writing about real people, but to a certain extent, he took liberties, had to deduce a lot about who these guys really were. He wrote characters, and then those characters were sort of translated into characters for a film, and then, you know, they're being translated again into characters for a TV show. So by the time you've run it through that many filters, I think there's still a certain amount of responsibility that you feel to the legacy of the actual human being that lived it, right, and to their family that's still around, and that still holds their experience, very close and very proud. But at the same time, you do have to remind yourself that you got to bring as much of yourself to the role as possible to, I guess, have the confidence to know that there's a reason that you're there. There's something inherent in you that mirrors who this person was, or what they want out of, what the producers want out of this character. And to just really try to own that and really, I guess, get in their skin as much as possible.
And before we go, I just want to ask Colin and Micah and Michael sort of about the research. Were you able to, did you actually have to go in zero gravity? Did you get to do anything fun? Or was it really grueling?
There was a lot of interactive things we got to do. We worked with this organization called the Starfighters Alliance, and no, we didn't get to go up in the fighter jets, but we got to sit in the cockpits of F-104s, and that was something that I didn't even realize how helpful that would be, to realize what the drive and the energy is sitting in that cockpit. And then we all got to stand on the runway where the shuttles landed, which is one of the longest runways in the world, I believe, and watch an F-104 take off, 50 yards in front of us and go up in the air, break the sound barrier, and come back down, and to really feel the force of that and to understand what it was these guys were attracted to. That was a really singular experience.
Yeah. Colin?
Likewise, what Micah was saying, all that, but then Jake and I got to actually shoot in the Mastiff. The production had built one, which rotates you in all the different sort of axes. So that was, getting to do that was a lot of fun, but similar to that, for me, actually sitting in the F-104 was really sort of, because that's the plane that these guys would have, as test pilots, flown in and stuff like that. And it kind of, we were in our jumpsuits and all that kind of stuff. It was, it was really, really good.
Michael, for you?
We got to tour the actual launch pads. So where both Shepard and Grissom went up, and for me, it was just remarkable. They have an actual to scale Mercury Redstone rocket there still. And so to actually not just stand exactly where they stood, but to kind of crane your neck up and look at just to get a sense of scale of it all, and to, to kind of look up the rocket and see the tiny little capsule that these guys sat in, and to just sort of think about what in the world must have been going through their mind to make them make life choices that got them into that. It just sort of encapsulates the courage, but also the insanity of it all. I remember literally just standing there thinking, these guys are effing nuts. This is like the visual representation of, sort of meeting the moment and kind of recognizing that the absurdity of the challenge, and kind of, not being intimidated and not shying away from it, but not just meeting it, but trying to push past that, what many people perceive to be a limit, and I think that's what kind of these guys were best at, is not just coming to the edge of something, but recognizing in order for this to work, we got to go far past it. And maybe that's, the right stuff. I don't know. I don't have it. So whatever it is.
Well, I want to remind everyone that The Right Stuff is available to stream on Disney Plus with new episodes every Friday. The season finale is November 20th. I cannot wait to see the rest. Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on a beautiful series.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.